Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, everybody, what's going on? This is Big B, Brien Hanley. Welcome to Big 12 Insiders Game Day. We got Cody, Nagel, and Alec Busse here again with us. You know what? Last week was kind of a weird week, fellas. That Colorado game, at the end of that game, I don't think I've ever seen. I've been around football a long time. Been watching it a long time. I don't think I've ever seen two back-to-back Hail Marys executed correctly. I'd never seen that before. I know the guy dropped the ball, but it literally hit him directly in the chest. Then we saw BYU literally just get dominated for 27 minutes of a football game and then flip the script and totally dominate Kansas State. That was crazy. And then Utah, I know the game was close at the end, but Utah just literally just smacked around Oklahoma State. I don't care what anybody says. That's what happened. It looked like a bully just walked up to him, punched him in the face, kept punching him in the face, and they couldn't do anything about it. So weird week last week. But today, you know, we're going to talk about a couple of different things. We're going to get into, can Travis Hunter, can he win the Heisman? BYU, I mean, can they sustain this level of play and be an actual factor in the Big 12 this week? Kansas, what the hell is going on there? I mean, I look like an idiot because I thought Kansas was going to be really well, and here we are, and they can't win a football game anymore. It's crazy. So we'll get into all of that and more. But most importantly, Cody, Alec, how are you guys doing?
Doing good. How are you?
I am good.
I'm doing well, Cody. I got to say, you have a great beard.
I appreciate it. I had to trim it up before this. It was getting a little straggly, so
I can't grow much, so I'm impressed by what you got there. It's got some nice flow to it.
I appreciate it.
Interesting. Yeah, my thing. Let's just get into this. Travis Hunter, in my opinion, fellas, I just think he's the best player in college football. I don't know if he can win the Heisman. I think Colorado has to have at least a winning record. Maybe this will be the year that trend changes, because I think people, for the most part, understand that he's the best player in college football. But I still think if you are, you got to be able to get your team at least to a winning record, I would hope. I mean, a lot of this is not his fault, clearly. But I'll just start with you, Alec. Can Travis Hunter win this thing?
I do think he can. I know Joel Klatt tweeted after the game on Saturday after they beat, Baylor, and he was kind of like, if your Heisman list doesn't start with Travis Hunter, it's wrong. I know a lot of people kind of get on Joel Klatt when he talks about Colorado, considering he went to school there, and there might be some inherent bias that exists. I will say I do think Travis Hunter should be maybe the Heisman front runner right now. Like, I think he's in the conversation with like Cam Ward at Miami. Jackson Dart, I think, leads the country in passing yards at Ole Miss. We know that Dylan Gabriel, I think, entered the season with the country's best odds. And I'm sure there'll be other guys that kind of emerge across the country. But I think Travis Hunter is doing something that we haven't ever really seen in college football before. You can talk about Charles Woodson or Chris Gamble at Ohio State. Obviously, Woodson was at Michigan back in the day when he won his Heisman. But those guys didn't play the amount of snaps both ways that Travis Hunter does now. And it's not only that he's playing the snaps that he's playing on each side of the ball. It's the volume of the snaps, and it's the production at the snaps that he's playing. He's got at least 100 receiving yards in every single game this season, which is just absurd. Just the one pick, but sometimes when you're a great corner, you don't get the ball thrown your way a whole lot. So he's a true number one wide receiver, and I think he's a true number one lockdown corner. And there's very few people like that around the country, Cody, and really never before in college football history.
Yeah, I think here's where I'm at. Should he win the Heisman? Yes. Will he? Probably not. Every finalist, like Heisman finalist, has their like moment, right? And I think Colorado's going to have to get a big upset somewhere on that schedule to kind of put him in the top level, I guess, for Heisman voters. When you look at how they vote, it's guys that are on good teams, and I'm not really sure if Colorado's quite that good team yet, but they've got chances on their schedule to get a big win. And if Travis Hunter's a big part of that, then I think he's going to rise up those odds lists or whatever. I mean, they've got Kansas State, Utah and Oklahoma State. I'm pretty sure all those are at home too. So they're going to have chances for upsets, and if Travis Hunter can play well in those games, I think he can kind of solidify himself as a finalist at least.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think is that it's early, and you've got opportunities to make some headway here. My thing about it is that the voters don't vote based on who they know is the best player. That's always been my problem, is that who the best player is. We can see, for the most part, it's not always clear cut, but who the best player is. And then the criteria on what you're voting on, I mean, look, is it my fault that look, Colorado's not a good football team. We can say that up to this point, they're not a very good football team. Things can change. But is it my fault that maybe the rest of my team isn't good? I mean, you're not going to penalize guys. For instance, you don't draft a guy that number one in the NFL because he played on a bad football team. They do that all the time, and they don't blame him for that. Well, why is the Heisman any different? Now, when you're talking about the MVP in the NFL, they do that, but I just always find it really weird how they take that more than what you actually see on the field. To me, it's just a weird way of voting to decide, well, his team was 6-6. Well, I mean, he didn't have an opportunity. I mean, he can't, it's a team sport. You can't, dictate everything that happens on a football field. You just can't do that.
Yeah. And like what Alex said, I mean, nobody's doing what Travis Hunter is doing. Nobody's playing the amount of snaps that he's playing. I mean, that alone sets him apart from every other player, regardless of it's, some quarterback putting up crazy numbers or, a receiver putting up big numbers or running back. I mean, obviously it's always going to like an offensive player, but what he does on the defensive side too, I think should get some more weight. I mean, I don't think he's allowed a touchdown this year. He's got the one interception or two interceptions, whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, what he's doing is something that no one else is doing. And I think that just proves that, he is the best player in college football. But like you mentioned too, I mean, how are the voters going to look at this? I mean, they're going to go for the guys that have the big flashy numbers, and Travis just isn't going to put those numbers up.
I do think it could help him that he plays at Colorado, and the type of ecosystem and coverage that program gets, and the amount of online attention that program gets. I think one of the unique things about the Heisman every single year is that it's broken up into like regional votes in a certain sense, and it seems like regionality kind of matters because the people who are voting within each region obviously spend the most time watching the programs within their region, unless there's a player that just like rises above the rest and it becomes clear that they're deserving of winning the Heisman. So potentially that could help Travis Hunter. I do think they'll have to, win some games, but I think if we saw anything this past weekend in the Big 12, it's that, anyone is beatable for the most part. And I think that, Colorado, obviously there was a stroke of luck involved in beating Baylor, who we think is one of the lower tier teams in the conference. But I think that, Colorado has every opportunity in front of them to go win 7 or 8 games if they take advantage of some lower level opponents in the Big 12, and then they maybe spring an upset or two, because I think that's certainly possible for them.
Right. But Cody, one thing that you mentioned initially earlier was talking about Heisman moment. I think that's crazy important because it seems to always happen every year. I think voters kind of have, I don't know, maybe voters remorse now, because you remember back when Lamar Jackson won, Lamar Jackson kind of had his Heisman moment in September. Well, then down the stretch, it didn't really end that well for Louisville or even for Lamar. And people basically had already made up their minds. It's almost like people already sent their ballots in and decided that he was going to be the guy. Well, you can kind of see maybe Travis Hunter's Heisman moment. I mean, I don't know. It's against Baylor. It's early September, but he does cause the fumble for them to win the game in overtime. I don't know if you want to say that's a Heisman moment or not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I kind of think that even if it is his Heisman moment, that voters are going to say, well, let's wait a little bit because of what happened previously. Because like I said, what was at that game? Obviously, it was the Florida State game that Louisville played. But the week before, when he hurdled the guy in Syracuse, people handed Lamar Jackson the Heisman Trophy then. Well, then the rest of the season happened, and it was like, well, wait a minute. But they couldn't take it back. So I don't know. It just seems like it's still early.
Yeah, definitely still early. And like I mentioned too, I mean, Colorado's got opportunities to have, big upsets, and
Right.
then I mean that works into Travis Hunter's favor too, to have bigger moments and against bigger opponents and in front of more eyes or whatever. So yeah, I think that it's still early, like you mentioned, but there's still time for him to move up those odds charts too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would also just say that, I feel like there's been other times where I think like the Leonard Fournette season, when maybe that was about 2015, where he was incredible for the first 2 months of the season. And it felt like that was a guarantee that he was going to win the Heisman that season at LSU. And then I think he kind of struggled a little bit in a loss to Alabama, and that kind of faded away. I'd also just say that like the year Lamar Jackson won the Heisman in 2017, I think he led the country in passing yards. And I think he also had like 30 total touchdowns or something like that. So he 30, 40, closer to 40, I think, 40 total touchdowns. So I think like he was no doubt the best player in the country and the most electrifying in 2017. And I'd have to go look at who else was in New York for that Heisman ceremony. But I think that if Colorado continues to be in bowl contention, I think he'll have an opportunity at the very least to get to New York. And right now it doesn't look like you've seen anyone across the country kind of separate themselves as a true Heisman favorite.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with because of schedule. It for some reason this season it just seems like early on there just hasn't been very many really good college football games. But that'll change this weekend. So that'll change this weekend, and as we get deeper into this thing, let's move on here. BYU, big win over Kansas State. Like I mentioned at the top of this thing, look, it looked like, I don't know, for 27 minutes, Kansas State was basically just, they dominated the football game. They were going up and down the field. They got stalled out in the red zone, which, by the way, that's what BYU really does well, is red zone defense. I don't think they get enough credit for that. But then turnover happens. Kansas State tried to get conservative at the end of the half. They end up fumbling, scoop and score. Then Kansas State tries to get aggressive, throws an interception. 2 plays later, touchdown, 17-6 at the half, and they could not turn off just the momentum switch, and BYU just rolled them after that. Absolutely rolled them. Is this sustainable, Alec, for BYU to continue this?
I think it's a question a lot of people are asking right now. It's funny. I was talking with one of our staffers over at the Iowa State website. He does our weekly power rankings. And he had BYU, I think, closer to like 5 or 6. And I was like, I would probably put them like 3 or 4. He was like, I'm not doing that. And we kind of had a good little back and forth about it. He was like, why would you put them at 3? And I'm like, well, I think their resume is better than UCF and they're undefeated. And I don't think that you should put them below teams who have a loss when they have 2 power conference victories. And they beat, in some people's opinions, the best team in the Big 12 entering the season on Saturday pretty handily. I think that BYU is kind of like a wait and see mode. Like, let's see what really happens for them. They had a good start to the year last year as well. I also would point out that, and this isn't to take anything away from them, but if you look at like some of the analytics of like how bad did they truly beat Kansas State, it was a pretty close margin. The turnovers played a massive impact on the outcome of that game. And they've got a really big opportunity this weekend playing on the road at Baylor. And I actually think they're an underdog at Baylor this weekend. Yeah, they're plus 3.5 on the road at Baylor this weekend. So that kind of just says everything you need to know about the Big 12. I think Jake Retzlaff has maybe exceeded expectations, Cody. And I think Clarence Satake is one of the better coaches in the Big 12. But do I think that BYU is the 22nd best team in the country? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean they've passed every test so far this season. They won the back-to-back road games, and they beat Kansas State at home. I mean we were kind of all over that one on our upset alerts or whatever. That that was one we needed to watch out for. But I mean, yeah, I mean really BYU just made a handful of game-changing plays that really swung the outcome of that and made it look a whole lot worse than really it was. But I really like what they're doing defensively. Jay Hill came in as their new coordinator last year from was it Weber State. Now he's in year 2, and it really seems like they're clicking. Like you mentioned, B, I mean their red zone defense is really good.
Yeah.
I think they rank second in the Big 12 in both points per game and yards per play allowed. So I mean that just shows they're starting to figure things out on that side of the ball. I mean their preseason win total was like 4.5. So they're going to hit that either this weekend or soon. And I think October will be a pretty tough stretch for them. But yeah, I mean, are they for real? I mean, I think they've kind of showed so far that, they've passed every test that they've had in front of them that, I think we kind of need to take it more seriously than maybe we were in the preseason.
Yeah, I think so too. Like you mentioned, they've passed every test. They have. I mean, all you can do is win the games that are in front of you, and they've done that. And like you said, they won the game pretty handily against Kansas State. Which again, I know that some turnovers happened and some fluky type-ish plays, but I think also BYU number one took advantage of those and they created some of those. So I don't want to take credit away from them, but you did mention something here, Cody. I'm looking at their schedule that October was going to be tough. Once they get past this Baylor game, the next 4 games are Arizona, Oklahoma State, at UCF, at Utah. So that's pretty tough. So we're going to find out pretty quickly how good BYU is. I do think that they're playing more physical style of football. Look, that was kind of the thing last year, that they just weren't as physical in the conference. And they said so. Coaching staff said so. Players said so. That they just underestimated maybe the physicality of what the Big 12 was about. And they've changed that this season. And I think, that's all you can look at. I mean, they've only played obviously one conference game, but they're playing a more physical style of football and kind of matching some of the stuff that's been put their way physicality wise this season. I think that's a big change for them, Alec.
Yeah, I think that was the one area where you saw all of the former American schools, BYU included in that. I know they were an independent, struggle in the Big 12 last year. And I think it's where you've kind of seen SMU struggle going from the American to the ACC this year. And even last year, it's where SMU struggled, right? Like they didn't beat a power conference team a season ago, despite being in contention for, the last CFP New Year's Six Bowl that ended up going to Liberty. I think that's just the hardest place to build a roster up, is the line of scrimmage. And I think that these schools that are coming from the lower levels are trying to have to balance that. And especially in this area where, there's so much player movement, the transfer portal helps that. But offensive linemen don't transfer in mass numbers. Defensive linemen transfer in a little bit more volume, but those guys are really expensive because there's very few of them available that are true impact players. So it's really hard to get a transfer defensive lineman that's really impactful. And I think BYU is better up front. I think they did a good job against Kansas State up front. I thought they did a good job against SMU in a pretty physical kind of game back in early September. But yeah, all things kind of considered there, I think that things are trending well for them, but you just kind of want to see them continue to prove it as they continue to play Big 12 opponents. And like you guys kind of said, like their upcoming schedule isn't the most favorable with Arizona. We don't really know how good they are, but Oklahoma State, I don't know how good we think they are after what Utah did to them. But UCF, I don't really know how good I think they are either. So we'll kind of see how everything kind of comes together for them before the Holy War in early November.
Gotcha. And I want to come to or talk about something. I didn't put this in anything, itinerary or what we were going to talk about today, but you brought up SMU. And the only thing that I thought about that, you said they hadn't beat a Power 4 team, and they end up beating the brakes off of TCU on Saturday. Guys, look, I'm 48 years old. I can remember going to high school football games with my father when I was 3 years old. I have that memory. So basically, we're talking 45 years of memory. I have never seen a football coach get kicked out of a game before. I don't know what Sonny Dykes said. Because, first of all, I've been on the sidelines, and I know you guys know this too. Those referees hear everything from coaches. I mean, you think of the worst thing that a coach could say, they've heard worse than that. I just can't imagine what he said to get kicked out of a football game. I mean, I'm just trying to figure this whole thing out. First of all, I don't know what's going on at TCU. I thought they would be better this year. That was embarrassing on Saturday. They should be embarrassed. But have you guys ever seen a football coach get kicked out of a game before? I mean, basketball is different. Guys get 2 Ts. It happens all the time. They walk on the court asking to get kicked out. Never seen that in football. Never in my life.
No, never football. I've seen a few basketball. Yeah, like you mentioned, basketball coaches get kicked out. Yeah, nothing's coming to mind for football games. But yeah, I mean, that was one of the craziest situations of the weekend, and there was a lot that happened, obviously. But yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, something's wrong at TCU. I'm not sure what it is right now. I thought they were going to be a lot better. I thought they had, used the transfer portal well and got some, good talent to kind of, fill the holes that they had. And I thought their defensive coordinator hire and Andy Avalos, I thought that was going to work out better. That doesn't seem to be the case at all. So yeah, there's a lot of problems there. And I think we saw the frustration from Sonny Dykes on Saturday.
Yeah, I just wonder how long this kind of like goes on for TCU. You had the dream run to the national title, but ever since losing 65-7 to Georgia in that game, it's pretty much been nothing but a big ball of frustration in Fort Worth. And then losing the Skillet game in the fashion that you did, and then you're like poking fun at SMU and the ACC for the game being on the CW, and it kind of comes back and hits you in your face.
Yep.
Doesn't look great. It also doesn't look great when you're the ones who are opting out of continuing that cross-city rivalry, and then you lose again in that kind of fashion. Like, there's a lot of things that have just been like kind of dysfunctional there. And I think a lot of people back in the 2022 season, when they did go to the CFP, I'm not saying it was fluky, but there was certainly a lot of luck in plays that went their way. Like, you think about the game-winning field goal in the game at Baylor, where they didn't have a timeout and they ran the field goal unit onto the field and they kicked the field goal as the time expired, as the clock kept running. Like, that's just kind of like an example, right? It's just a weird situation down there. And I don't think Sonny Dykes is in the hot seat, but like, it's just uncomfortable. And I think fans are frustrated because it's been such a downturn since the strong debut first season.
Yeah, well, some of the things that I've talked to some people from TCU that are very frustrated. They're like, yeah, they made the run to the national title game, but there's a lot of Gary Patterson's guys, and that can't be denied. It was a lot of Gary Patterson's guys. And then you think about Sonny Dykes. I mean, let's just call it what it is. They made that run, but at the beginning of the year, Sonny Dykes picked the wrong quarterback. Like, Max Duggan wasn't even the starter to begin the season, and guy had to get hurt for him to go into the game. So it's like, okay, what's going on here? So I don't know. Like you mentioned, Alec, I don't think he's on the hot seat at all. And again, I didn't mean to throw you guys off. I just thought it was something that we should talk about because, like I said, I've never seen a football coach get kicked out, and I've heard some crazy stuff that coaches have said to referees.
Bill Snyder line towards an official.
Oh my goodness! I mean, I've heard it all and then some, and the refs usually don't even turn around. So, and they can hear him because they're screaming in their ear. But yeah, for him to get kicked out, it was almost like he was like, "Look, we're getting our head beaten in. Just throw me out of here, please. Throw me out of here. I don't even want to be out of here." Speaking of that. I can't figure out Kansas. Look, I'll be the first to say now there's a lot of season still left, but they're sitting here at 1-3. I thought they'd be 4-0. I really like Kansas going into the beginning of the year because I like their coach, I like the quarterback, I liked everything that they had coming back. It was an experienced group, and it just has fallen apart. Now you can place blame a lot of different places, but I think, guys, and I'll start with you, Cody. I think you just got to say the offensive coordinator change must be a much bigger deal than what any of us thought it would be, because it doesn't look like Jalen Daniels knows how to play quarterback anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily time to panic in Lawrence. I think it says a lot about what Lance Leipold has built there, that people actually kind of care when Kansas isn't doing well.
Right.
They really just can't seem to finish games. And as someone who went to Nebraska and watches a lot of Husker games, it's kind of like watching Nebraska right now. They can't finish games. They can't finish one possession games in the fourth quarter. I think they've held a lead in the fourth quarter in all three of these games. But no, I don't think Kansas is necessarily bad. I think they've got a problem at quarterback right now. And I think the confidence in that program that was starting to build over the last few years is kind of fading. And they're just not being able to close out those games in the fourth quarter like they were.
I think as it goes for them, the problem is pretty easy to fix. It's quit turning the ball over. Yeah. Like, if they quit doing that, they're going to have an opportunity to win these games. Like, they lost to Illinois because they turned the ball over 3 or 4 times. Like, Jalen Daniels had 3 picks, I think it was, in the game against Illinois. 3 picks against Illinois. So I had to double check that. He had 2 against UNLV. And obviously they had the one where, the defense kicked the ball all over the field and it allowed UNLV to get all the way inside of the red zone.
Right.
Which that was kind of funny actually to watch. That was like peak Friday night college football play. That would never happen anywhere else. And then even this past weekend, he had 1. He has 7 picks on the year. If you quit turning the ball over, it's going to become a lot easier to win as the season progresses. It just feels like they've thrown 3 wins away in a certain sense, particularly the Illinois game and particularly the West Virginia game. And it's weird to say that about Lance Leipold because he is one of the better coaches in the Big 12, or at least he has been for the last 3 years at KU. And you expect well-coached teams to not shoot themselves in the foot as much as they have in the first month of the year. I oddly felt like going into that KU West Virginia game that it was going to be complete panic mode for whichever team came out with the loss. But I almost feel like we avoided that because I think each team feels like, well, damn, we should have lost.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I don't even know if either fan base feels better about themselves coming out of the game, which is weird.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is West Virginia must have given Kansas the blueprint on how to lose a game in the last 5 minutes because they literally did it the week before against Pitt, had the game well under control, and then just gave the game away. And Kansas did the exact same thing. I try not to blame kids and all that kind of stuff too often, just because I think it's kind of tacky to constantly blame kids in college football. Having said all of that, could this be a case, and I know we've all seen this before, where team gets overconfident and reads press clippings and thinks that they have arrived when they really haven't arrived? Could that be the case at all, Alec, here, where you see where Kansas, maybe everybody's telling them how good they are and they're reading how good they are. They're listening to people like me tell them how good they are. And then all of a sudden you get out on the field and you still got to do it, a little bit of adversity, and they don't know how to handle that. And kind of being the hunted is a little bit different than being the hunter.
I think there's some truth to that. I also just think it's worth pointing out, and maybe I'm in a minority here, I think KU was good the last couple of seasons, but I think that they were more like a pretender than a contender in the Big 12 the last 2 years, 3 years, as things kind of started to trend upward. Even this year, I remember saying to people that I thought KU was a top 5 or 6 team in the Big 12 entering the year, but a lot of people thought that they were a better contending team than Iowa State. And I was like, I just don't think their roster construction is as good as Iowa State's is.
No.
And I think it takes a long time to build that up. Matt Campbell's in his 9th season at Iowa State, and Lance Leipold's only in his 4th season, I think, at KU. And I think you're seeing some of that kind of shine through here a little bit. We talk about, the continuity of the offensive staff turnover. I think that raises some concern. And, quite frankly, it's the same offense and in terms of a lot of the scheme things from what I understand that they're doing. But I think what makes Andy Kotelnicki such a respected offensive mind is, in addition to just being a really good schemer, he's a great play caller. And that's a really hard thing to find. When you have a really good play caller, those guys stick around for a really long time in the sport, even if there's some circumstances that maybe shouldn't allow those things to happen. I mean, shoot, look at Hugh Freeze, look at Lane Kiffin, look at Sark. All those guys have battled things off the field that are much different in their careers. They're all very different, but they've all been able to resurface. And I think that Jeff Grimes is he's moved around a lot as an offensive coordinator. And when you move around a lot, that kind of says something about hey, there's a reason that you're not sticking at a place for a really long time. Right, Cody?
Yeah. And I think, we've mentioned it before. I think that's the biggest issue with Jalen Daniels is he's not comfortable, or there's not quite that, that synergy with him and Jeff Grimes as there was with him and Andy Kotelnicki. I think there's, and I haven't watched it closely enough or gone back and watched it, but, I think Jalen's being put in a situation where he's having to sort of read the defense more rather than with Kotelnicki. It was okay, here's where the ball's going. It was quick stuff. So yeah, I think there's some issues there. But yeah, I don't think it's time to panic. I think Lance Leipold will get it settled down, and they'll get things fixed. But yeah, they've got an issue with turning the ball over at quarterback, and I think that's the biggest key right now.
Yeah, I think if they can get some of that settled down, but again, I just go back to just keep running the football. Just keep they're having a ton of success running the football. I don't see why run it 50 times if you have to, 60 times if you have to. Change something. You know what I mean? If your quarterback's struggling, do something different, man. And again, I know it gets tough constantly running the football, and it may not be the most exciting brand of football, but KU just needs a win. They just need a win in the worst way. So if you got to run it 55, 60 times to go get a win, then that's just what you need to do to get a win, to try to get this thing going in the other direction. So upset of the week. Everybody but me got it right last week. You guys were both on BYU, and I just refused to do it. You know, I don't know why, but you both had it right. Alec, who do you have this week? This week is a little tougher because the spreads, again, they're close, and then there's some that the numbers are a little longer. So who do you have as far as an upset of the week this week?
I guess I'd go BYU again. I don't think Baylor's very good. And the way that Baylor just lost, to me, the way Baylor lost is like the sign of a head coach just getting fired. Like, you don't really come back from that very often. I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of the moment that we all circle as the kind of the beginning of the true end for Dave Aranda. I think that BYU would be the team that I pick. I mean, I think Houston's really bad. I expect Iowa State to cover there. I think TCU and KU is a game that pick a rabbit out of a hat. Who's probably going to win. And like, I think Oklahoma State at K-State, I don't know. I don't have a great feel for it. I guess I would just go with BYU at Baylor just because I've the line, and I think BYU is quite frankly better than Baylor is.
Yeah, I'm going to go with BYU too. I know we're sticking with the
Cody.
same picks.
Ride it until we can't anymore.
But yeah, I'm going BYU. I think, it's not really an upset because BYU's ranked and Baylor's bad.
But
we
like use gambling lines to determine
upsets. Right. But like I said earlier, I like what BYU's doing defensively. I think their quarterback, Jake Retzlaff, is finding his footing in that offense. And I just really don't have much belief that Dave Aranda is going to stop this decline that Baylor is in. I mean, ever since they won the Big 12 title, it's just been completely downhill, and he can't seem to stop it or whatever. So, yeah, and I think he gets the sense that his days might be numbered, and yeah, I'm going to go with BYU too.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are right. The way that they lost the game, I'm not sure the kids are going to recover, much less everything else. But again, to come out with that play call and then to say what was it, Victory Cigar or something, and you send a blitz and you got two safeties that are standing in the back of the end zone on a Hail Mary. Again, never seen anything like that in football where the guys are in the back of the end zone. But whatever. I don't know, man. I'm going to stay away from that BYU Baylor. The only reason is Vegas has that line for a reason. I just don't know. I'm getting away from it. I don't know. I don't like the Colorado UCF game. I guess I would take it because I think Colorado will cover. But I don't think they're going to win that football game. It's 14.5. So I think I'll take Colorado to cover. I think UCF wins. I think it may even be high scoring, but I'll take them to cover, Colorado to cover. Now we got the lock of the week. Cody, who do you got?
I'm actually going to take Utah. I think it's minus 11.5 against Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know if it's going to matter if Cam Rising plays or not. I think Utah's pass defense is good enough that it can stop what Arizona has. As we saw earlier in September, if you take away Tedero McMillan, I don't think Arizona really has another option behind him that's reliable. And yeah, going into Rice Eccles Stadium at nights, I think Utah covers that pretty easily, honestly.
Yeah, I'll take Utah. Sorry, guys. Really varying up the opinions here. I think Utah is the best team in the league. I thought they were head and shoulders above the rest of the league entering the season, to be honest, with you guys. And what they did to Oklahoma State just confirmed that opinion to me. I think this is Utah's league to lose, and it's hard to go win at Rice Eccles. And nobody knows that better than a former Pac-12 school. So I'll take Utah as well, B.
Gotcha. I'm going to go Texas Tech here.
I thought about them.
Yeah, I'm going to go Texas Tech. I know, look, Cincinnati fans, I just took them out of my bottom of my power rankings, so they are just now getting over me being mad at them. But you know what? I think Texas Tech is better than they are. And I think Texas Tech has finally figured out some stuff that they can do defensively, because I think that was kind of their problem. I think they may have figured that out. I think it's -2.5. They're at home. I just think this is a win that Texas Tech is going to get. That is my lock for the week.
Seems
So
like a
lastly,
prime regression spot for Cincinnati too. Like after you win 34-0 at home,
yeah,
prime regression spot.
I mean, and the thing is, look, I think Cincinnati can be good, or let me say this, I think they can be better. I shouldn't say they'd be good because I don't think they're that good. I think they can be better. I think they have an opportunity to get to a bowl game, but asking them to go on the road and win a game like this after a big win, I think you're right, Alec. Even if it wasn't a big win, even if they eat the game out against Houston, going on the road and winning, I'm not sure that that's in the cards for them this year to be able to do that. Going to the game of the week this week, big game, Oklahoma State against Kansas State. I don't think it's necessarily a elimination game, because I think whoever goes to the Big 12 championship game minus Utah might have 4 losses. That could be a possibility. It could be that crazy in this conference. Although I don't think Iowa State will get to 4. But it could be. I mean, it could be anything. Having said all of that, I think the loser of this game is kind of in trouble just for their confidence alone. They both kind of got smacked around a little bit, especially Oklahoma State. Big game, Alec. Who do you like?
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating matchup. Mike Gundy, Chris Kleiman, both coming off of an embarrassing loss. That's a compelling television show, boys. I think I like K-State for whatever reason. I think I trust them to run the ball better. They've done it a lot better throughout the season. I think that they kind of have to have a feel of what they are offensively at this point now. Like, you've seen Avery Johnson throw it. It's still a pretty big, clear work in progress right now for him. You've got a potential 3-headed monster running with Johnson, Edwards, and Giddens. It's in Manhattan. I like K-State to win this, and I kind of disagree. I think this might be an elimination game in terms of Big 12 title hopes for whoever loses, because I think winning 7 consecutive Big 12 games is just going to be a lot to ask for any team in the conference this year.
Yeah, so I was in Manhattan the last time this game was played there.
Me too.
And there was a lot of stunned faces on the Oklahoma State players and coaches. I mean, it was, 48-0, something like that?
Yeah, 48 or 49.
Yeah, something like that. But I mean, yeah, there's obviously a lot of new contributors for Oklahoma State since then, and it's not completely the same roster. But the players that are there, they certainly remember that. On the flip side, Kansas State remembers what Oklahoma State did on last year in Stillwater. So I think there's sort of the revenge factor for both sides. But I know Oklahoma State has not looked great on offense. I think there's too much talent at the skill positions for them that they'll figure something out. We sort of keep saying it too, that Gundy's offenses don't stay down for that long. He's going to figure something out. They're going to figure out a way to get Allie Gordon going. I think the decision to pull Alan Bowman last week, I think was kind of confusing, but I think he kind of needed it, because if he starts spiraling out of control, it could get bad quick, and those turnovers are really going to rack up. So I think that was sort of a, let's look ahead to next week. Let's take him out. Let's get him calmed down and get some confidence back in him. Yeah, I think that'll work out this week, and I'm actually going to go with Oklahoma State in this one.
Gotcha. The thing for me is, look, the one thing that I shouldn't say the one thing, but one thing that Kansas State happens to do well is stop the run. And Oklahoma State, for whatever reason, hasn't been able to run the football. I mean, even you go back to last year, that UCF game, but kind of since then, they haven't really been able to run the football. So, and none of that changed, especially against Utah, but even against Tulsa. You could say, well, it's just Tulsa. Well, Allie Gordon got the ball 17 carries. And what did he have? 45 yards. They just can't run the football. And in a game where if they're not going to be able to run it and they're going to rely on Alan Bowman to beat you, I don't know that he's going to be able to go into Manhattan and win. If this game was in Stillwater, I would give Oklahoma State I would give them the nod to win this game. But because the game is in Manhattan, look, you can call me a homer. I've seen this tune a million times. Play a bad game, come out the next game, their head's on fire, and they roll over somebody. Now, I'm not going to say they're going to roll over Oklahoma State because I don't believe that. I believe the game's going to be close. But I'm going to take Kansas State just for the simple fact the game's in Manhattan, and Oklahoma State just has not been able to run the football. And I don't think you can beat Kansas State in Manhattan if you're only going to be one-dimensional.
No, I think you're right too. And like you mentioned, I mean, Kansas State doesn't really lose a lot of games back to back, and Oklahoma State doesn't do that either. So I think it's really going to be an interesting matchup to see who kind of bounces back and gets back on track for the Big 12 title game. And yeah, I think the loser is definitely in, sort of a panic mode there as far as, we're going to have to win 7 straight to get back into this because there's not really much room for error.
You're on mute, Alec.
People are mowing the grass outside of my apartment. So I went on mute to be kind to the listeners. I was going to say, even if you win 7 straight, though, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to be in the Big 12 title game.
Nope.
The tiebreaker scenarios are all super convoluted and confusing. So, yeah, I do, in a certain sense, think that this might be an elimination game. Even if the winner ends up or the loser ends up going 7-2, like that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll get to the Big 12 title game. So, yeah, I think it's probably the most interesting game in the Big 12 this weekend for sure. And it's probably one of the more interesting games in the 11 o'clock window if you look across the country because you've got obviously like the UK Ole Miss game on ABC. You've got Minnesota, Michigan. That's probably not great either. So I think this is one of the better games in that noon window.
Yeah. Lastly, look, I didn't bring this up for you guys and send this up mainly because the information just came out a minute ago, about an hour ago, talking about the NIL. Sloot, the quarterback from UNLV, left and basically said, came out, he didn't get his NIL money, so now he's going to redshirt. There's people all over the place. This is ruining college football. I knew this was going to happen. And my first thought with that, and I think, Alec, me and you are kind of in this, we had the same wavelength. It's like, first off, it's not ruining college football because the stadiums were full last week. They're going to be full again this week, and everybody's going to still watch college football and college athletics. So it's not ruining anything. Second of all, this is the way things are being done now. NIL is a part of it. I'm not saying you have to like it, but if it's a part of it, you got to learn to live with it. And this is what it is. Everybody doesn't like it. Sure, I think there should be some safeguards and stuff in there as well, but this is kind of where we're at with this. So you got to play by this. And if you don't, these kinds of things are going to happen here.
Yeah, I think it's really kind of an interesting dynamic to observe. I remember kind of waking up and seeing the news this morning and be like, ooh, really interesting to read about today. And it's only proceeded to get more interesting as you've said each side kind of released their side of the story. Obviously, Shulka's kind of said like, hey, they said that I was going to get $100,000 to transfer there. And now the collective has released a statement kind of saying, hey, like that was not actually promised.
Right.
I think the reality, it kind of lies somewhere in the middle. I would also just say that, Cody, like the people who are going to complain about this, like don't complain about NIL and don't complain about the ecosystem of college football now. Complain about the ecosystem being the way it is because the NCAA let it be this way.
Yes.
They stole from the athletes for 50 years. Right. Like we saw Reggie Bush this week file a suit against the NCAA, the Pac-12, and someone else, maybe USC itself. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
USC was the third one there.
Yep.
Like those suits are going to keep coming because the athletes were stolen from for 100 years. So I don't think the House settlement ends these things. Collective bargaining, employment ends these kind of things. And, if he was promised he was going to get something and he didn't get it, like, how would you guys feel if you were paid a third of what you were supposed to be paid on your first paycheck at a new job? Like you would do the same thing that he's doing right now. At the same time, if he ended up going back into Barry Odom's office and said, "Hey, we're 3-0, we beat 2 Big 12 teams. I want more money," and that wasn't agreed to before the season, well,
yeah,
kind of tied with UNLV. But in reality, I think it's somewhere in the middle, Cody.
Yeah, I think I haven't read all the details on this yet, and I've been trying to catch up on it this morning. But my first thought was this all could have been easily preventable if the NCAA would have just gotten ahead of all this, set some guidelines, set some actual rules, rather than rules that don't really make sense and are kind of, up in the air as far as, what's legal, what's not legal. But yeah, I mean, I think that was just the biggest issue, and that all these, I think this is just the one instance of many others that are going to happen in the coming years if they don't get something figured out. Yeah, I don't really know what to think of this because I haven't read all the details yet. But my first thought was this all could have been preventable if the NCAA would have just gotten ahead of it and actually set some guidelines.
Yeah, I think it's crazy that it's gotten to this point. But Alec, I think you're right. Well, first of all, both of you are right. But Alec, to your point, yeah, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Because now it's, well, an assistant coach made that promise to me, and if it didn't come from me, then it wasn't valid. Well, I don't know. And here's another thing. I know nobody wants to talk about this. If you're UNLV, why are you paying a quarterback from Holy Cross $100,000 to come to your school? That's another thing. Why would you do that? Do you need to pay him $100,000? Is he that good? Do we know that he's that good? I don't know. So that's another avenue with this. It's all twists and turns and things of that nature. But Cody, again, to your point, it all could have been avoided if the NCAA, who again has been stealing from players for 50 years, had they just gotten out in front of this and done their job, none of this would even be an issue. But the one thing that I do know, for all it's ruining college athletics. No, it's not. No, it's absolutely not ruining college athletics. It's always been a business. Now the difference is who's actually getting paid. But the money is still there. It's always been about money. I mean, that none of that's ever changed. So I don't know why people think that now. Well, I do know why, but I don't want to get into that. We could be here all day. So
do we know if it was like a written contract that they failed to?
Nope.
It was all just verbal stuff.
Yep.
See, that's the other thing. Like, I don't think these schools were wanting to do written contracts because they didn't know what the rules necessarily were.
Yep.
Because if you have something in paper and then they come back and like, oh no, that's illegal.
Yep.
Well, then they're kind of stuck. So I think it was all these verbal agreements that, are kind of up in the air, and it's just he said, she said, and whatever. So yeah, again, I think it's a lot of this is on the NCAA, or if not all of this is on the NCAA for just not getting ahead of it and setting actual rules that are clear and easy to follow.
Yeah, I would just say that people act like the system's crumbling, but there's still 100,000 people filling stadiums every Saturday, and TV networks are paying conferences $70 million for every school to broadcast their games. As long as there's money going into the ecosystem, the system's fine.
Exactly. That's been my point from the very beginning. I know we don't have to like it. I'm not even sure that I like all of it, but it's not ruining anything because I'm still going to watch. You're going to watch. Everybody's still going to watch. So it is what it is. Well, thank you guys again for coming on today. I appreciate you guys giving your time. Everybody out there, again, remember to like, follow, subscribe, leave those comments. We appreciate you guys. We will be back next week with Big 12 Insiders Game Day.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.